What I love about the job is that you get to build relationships with the customers and the businesses, along with your coworkers. Every day you see them and things like that. So it does build that camaraderie, that brotherhood.
Justin Allo looks and sounds like your friendly, everyday UPS delivery driver in San Marcos, California. He drives the brown package truck, he wears the brown uniform, and he delivers, well, packages.
What's up, Trent? All right, you too.
Now, while Justin looks like a regular package car driver out of Teamsters Local 542, and he pretty much does that job, there are some key differences between him and other drivers. For example, he makes substantially less money per hour. He has fewer job protections, and he has to work on Saturdays. In other words, he's performing equal work, but for unequal pay. That's what they call the two-tier at United Parcel Service. Hello, my name is Teddy Ostro, and welcome to the Upsurge, a podcast about UPS, the Teamsters, and the future of the American labor movement. This podcast unpacks the unprecedented labor fight this year at UPS. In July, the contract of 350,000 UPS workers will expire. And if those workers strike, which is a real possibility, it will be the largest strike against a single company in U.S. history. In the last episode of The Upsurge, we tried to lift the veil on UPS's silent majority, part-time warehouse workers. That was the first of two parts in which we try to paint a picture of what it's like to be a UPS worker. Well, here's the second part. In this episode, we're focusing on the company's package car delivery drivers, the face of UPS. And we're going to dive into some of the key issues they hope to address in this year's contract campaign, some of which you may be familiar with, like the lack of AC in package cars.
The back of the truck is an oven. I know you've seen probably several things where people have thermometers in the back getting well over 120 degrees. It's horrible. Like you're back there for a few seconds and you're drenching in sweat.
UPS's refusal to put air conditioning in delivery trucks is a life or death issue. We discussed it in previous episodes, but you might have heard about the tragic death last year of Esteban Chavez, a 24-year-old UPSer in California, caused by extreme heat. Heat protections are something that all drivers are fighting for, but in this episode, we're focusing on a particular group, or a tier, of package car drivers at UPS. They're known by a few different names, but it's all the same thing: hybrid drivers, combination drivers, or the name you'll hear most in this episode, 22-4s. That's a shorthand for Article 22, Section 4 of the Teamsters 2018 contract, which brought this second-tier driving position into being. If you want to drive at UPS post-2018, that's the position you'll most likely get. Justin, who you heard from at the top, is a 22-4. We'll get into the details in a second, but it's important up front that you know that 22-4s are at the center of arguably the most hot-button issue of the Teamsters' entire 2023 contract campaign.
Well, the pressure is to get rid of the 22-4 altogether, which would make everyone a regular package car driver.
The injustice of doing the exact same job as someone else and getting paid less for it, having less benefits, having less rights on the job is very clear.
I talked to 22-4s from all over, from California, Kentucky, New York, Georgia, and Illinois, and all of them expressed frustration with doing the same work as the top-tier drivers, but for less. Many Teamsters believe that it's management's way of dividing the workforce.
The meat and potatoes of it is that having a two-tier job in any union will destroy the union. It is cancer for the union.
That's David Allen, a UPSer from Teamsters Local 728 in Atlanta, Georgia, and the host of the educational YouTube channel Roswell Hub, named after the building where he works.
We don't need members fighting amongst members, and then the company wins.
David is an RPCD, or regular package car driver, a job classification that was only brought into existence with the 2018 contract. It distinguishes what had previously been, well, the regular package car driver job from the 22-4s, or hybrid driver.
224s do the exact same job that I do, as a package car driver, and we are on two different pay scales, and they get no rights where I do. It kind of destroys what makes this job so coveted to begin with.
In other words, the 22.4 represents a deterioration of the middle-class promise that being a package car driver at UPS affords. And the division it creates among workers also leaves the rest of the workforce open to deterioration too. Now, when the 22.4 position was introduced, a lot of drivers understood the threat that it posed. But other younger workers who took the job didn't necessarily know what they were getting into.
Hey, good morning. What's going on? It's the 224 out of the San Marcos building in Southern California.
That's Justin Alo again, the 22.4 from San Marcos.
And then the next thing is just check out the volume setup in the truck. Make sure that the power's on the outside so you can run a smooth.
Like a lot of package car drivers, Justin started out as a part-time warehouse worker in 2018, shortly before the signing of that year's contract.
I was working two jobs. I had my morning job, and then I would get off at a certain time, and then I would go right into twilight. And I did that for about a year and a half, too, and then I got the phone call to go driving, and I went in as a cover driver.
Basically, as a cover driver, Justin would take some delivery shifts from the regular package car drivers. To his delight, he'd get a few more bucks per hour out of it, but the position was still part-time, and he could be forced back into the warehouse at any moment. And his wages, they'd be brought back down with him. So that's when the newly minted 22.4 position, a full-time driving gig with consistently higher wages, became appealing. He didn't really understand the full picture, though.
When I went as a cover driver, we didn't know much about the 224. So when they kept calling me to go 224, we would ask shop stewards, we would ask, people around. Nobody could really give us a clear answer as far as, because nobody really understood what it all really entailed. So I didn't feel comfortable to make that transition over if I didn't understand the job classification myself.
Justin wasn't the only UPSer confused about the 22.4 position. Indeed, when the two-tier was first proposed, lots of drivers were in the dark. But then one UPSer took it upon himself to shed some light on it, to lay it all out for everyone to understand. Here's David Allen again, the driver from Atlanta.
In 2018, there was this video that came out that Tyler Bender made. It's famously known as the whiteboard video. It's actually titled, "Why the UPS 2018 Contract Sucks!" Exclamation point.
This video David's talking about, it came out during the negotiations for the 2018 contract, after the company and the Teamsters came to a tentative agreement, and the contract was up for a vote among UPS Teamsters.
This video has 137,000 views right now. This video was viewed almost by every single driver at UPS, and it was shared around. I remember when this video came out, I had people coming up to me all over my building asking me if I had seen this video. The video basically laid out why this 224 language was terrible language.
You are now the cheapest way for UPS to move cardboard all around the country on the weekends, 7 days a week, and you think that you're working 40 hours a week?
Now, the 22.4s are called hybrid or combination drivers because these workers were supposed to work half the time as a preloader in the warehouse and half as a driver out on the road. But pretty much everyone I spoke to over my past 8 months of reporting on UPS said they don't work in the warehouse. They do the exact same thing as regular package car drivers.
On top of that, the language actually explicitly says in here that this position was created to reduce overtime hours for regular package car drivers and to prevent us from working Saturday and Sunday. So I would vote no on this unless for some reason you want to give UPS $20,000 a year out of your pocket to work the weekends.
David explained that Binder's video sparked outrage that rippled across the UPS Teamsters. Rank and filers, backed by the reform movement Teamsters for a Democratic Union, channeled that outrage into a vote no campaign on that 2018 tentative agreement. And indeed, that's what the Teamsters did. The majority of members that voted on the contract voted no, and it was a momentous victory for those who had fought so hard to keep the two-tier out of their workforce. But then, a bomb dropped.
The problem is that there was a clause that there's this 2/3 rule where if 2/3 of the members do not vote, they can push through the contract anyways. Because of that, they ended up pushing the contract through anyways, even though majority of the members voted no on it.
Yes, you heard that right. Teamsters democratically voted this contract down. But using the authority of an archaic clause in the Union Constitution, the international leadership pushed the contract through anyway. But if you listen to our first 2 episodes, you may not be very surprised. Let's remember, this was during the Hoffa years, when the union's leadership was very go along and get along with the company. James P. Hoffa, the general president of the union at the time, had been pushing members to vote yes on the contract. But probably the most mind-boggling part about the whole scandal,
As bad as it is, I hate to say it, but the 224 language is actually introduced by the union. The Teamsters introduced it as a proposal.
let that sink in for a moment. The proposal to introduce a cancer into the union, a 2-tier system, was introduced by the union itself. You could imagine how the membership felt.
You can basically talk to any truck driver when that contract was pushed through. It made us sick to our stomach. I was actually scared it was going to diminish the union because we actively had a leadership that was going against the members' best wishes. I remember I had a friend at the time that had a Teamster tattoo on him, and he said he wanted to get it lasered off because he was so pissed off.
And so the 2nd-tier driving position was born. Back to Justin. With much of this history unknown to him, he decided to take the 22-4 position in June 2021. He had just had his 2nd child and needed the stability of a higher wage.
I didn't want to get sent back to the hub. So I made the transition to go 224. And it was a sacrifice I made to go Tuesday through Saturday. And that was one of the things I didn't want to give up my Saturday because my family.
Justin isn't the only 22-4 I spoke to who didn't know the full implications of the 2-tier. There was also Lee Brown, a driver from the famously militant Teamsters Local 705 in Chicago. Lee had been at the company since 2006. As a career move, he decided after roughly 14 years working part-time in the warehouse that he'd shoot for the package car driver position.
I actually didn't know that I was going to be a part of the 22-4. Yeah, I thought I was just coming in as a regular driver, with the regular things.
I asked Lee if he felt somewhat shafted by UPS, getting put into a 2nd-tier driving position after being at the company for so long.
That's very strange to me. Matter of fact, they rolled back your seniority for driving, which was very odd to me because I'm like, I can understand if I was to come outside of the company. I was hired outside the company. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have the same seniority as the person who stayed. For me to give you guys my blood, sweat, and tears for this long, and then when I come in and there's guys who've only been here not even a year longer than me, and they're getting more benefits.
Like Justin, Lee made a sacrifice. Because he worked as a part-timer for so long, he actually took a pay cut moving into the 22-4 position, which he felt wasn't very fair. Now, before we get into the other issues 22-4 drivers experience on the job, I want to clarify that the drivers I interviewed all said something similar. There's a reason people remain drivers at UPS for 20 or 30 years. It's a good job. And not only because of the pay and benefits.
Hey, just about to wrap up my break here. And it's a beautiful day to be a UPS driver. I mean, it's sunny, it's 71 degrees. I've got the tunes on. I know you're all wondering what I'm listening to. The answer is Kavinsky, okay? Night Call from the wonderful movie Drive featuring Ryan Gosling. I know you all seen it.
That's Chris Wallace, a 22-4 driver from Louisville, Kentucky, a member of the powerhouse Teamsters Local 89. He sent me some recordings from his day. It is clear that Chris often has a lot to look forward to. He has relationships with his customers, and sometimes he even gets surprises from their pets.
I actually had to take a video of this because this has never happened to me. But what y'all doing? Are y'all supposed to be in here? Are y'all supposed to be in here?
You can hear the joy in Chris's voice when I asked him what he liked about the job.
People love the UPS guy. It's so funny. I mean, people are just constantly thanking you. They're constantly happy to see you. They seem to intrinsically understand that you are working hard to deliver the best service that you can to them. And that I'm not ashamed to say that makes me feel good. I like that when I roll up, people are happy to see me.
The best days and weeks for Chris are those when he has some regularity on the job. That's when he gets put on his standard delivery route.
I've done it so many times that I know every single street on that route. I know every single turnaround. I know the fastest way to maneuver it. And so I know right away when I look at the computer in the morning of what's supposed to be in my car, if this is going to be a difficult route, a long day, or not.
But there are days when Chris gets put on what's called a cold route. That's one he's never done before. This is a common part of the 22-4's job. They don't have much of a say on what route they're given for the day, unlike regular package car drivers who get to bid on a route. So pretty often, 22-4s won't have any idea what they're walking into.
Cold routes are quite stressful, or at least they certainly can be, because you're driving a big package car out there, and if you don't know for sure that you can make it down that driveway and there's a turnaround, well, you might be in trouble when you get up there. You don't know what's waiting for you. And you've run into that situation 25 times in a day, and that's going to really start adding up.
Justin from California also struggles with cold routes. Here's a recording he sent me while on his break.
All right, so it's midday, midway through the route right now. Kind of struggling a bit because I'm on a new route on Saturday.
Saturday is the day that Justin wishes he had with his kids. But because he's a 22-4, he's often stuck navigating roads he doesn't know, unsure when he'll get home.
I've never done this one, so I went out cold. And the hardest part about it is you're doing apartments you don't know how it's ran, so it can really put you behind the 8-ball. So now I'm going to go ahead and reorganize my truck to hopefully have a better and smoother day. I got majority of the...
On top of driving cold routes, 22-4s are missing some key overtime protections that other drivers are afforded. Among them is called an 8-hour request. Basically, that's the right to occasionally demand no more and no less than 8 hours of work on a particular day. If management wants you to work 9 hours, you can say nope, won't do it. Another is called 9-5 rights. That's when UPS drivers can opt to limit how many days a week they work over 9.5 hours. If the company violates these requests, which many workers told me they often do, they have to pay workers some penalty money. But 22-4s have no such protections. And it was clear from my conversations that these drivers are not just fighting for more money, but for a better quality of life, the right to say no to overtime, and spend more time with their families, to be treated as people and not just workers. But this unpredictability for Justin and for Chris and other 22-4s is a lucrative flexibility for the company. Beyond schedules and wages, one of the greatest concerns I heard from drivers is their mere safety on the job. Yvette Avery, a 22-4 driver and union sibling of David Allen at their Atlanta Local 728, says that UPS supervisors often put a lot of pressure on drivers to pick up their pace.
It's definitely stress involved, the stress being put on you by management. Now, you have to decide whether you take it on or not, but they try their best to, come at you about, your numbers, getting in early, moving faster. They send messages throughout the day to our boards, several different messages. Just going off, which is another added stress when we're trying to perform a job. We don't have time to sit around and read messages sometimes that don't need to be said.
The pressure to work faster, to make as many deliveries as possible, gets into drivers' heads, especially new hires. Matt Leichinger, a 22-4 out of Local 804 in Brooklyn, New York, put a name to it for me.
There's a phenomenon at UPS among drivers called being a runner. Someone who moves through their route at, an unsafe pace. They might literally run. They're really trying to move through it to get home as quickly as possible, or to kill the route. Management loves runners because they are delivering more packages in a shorter period of time. So in that sense, they're more valuable workers because they, are producing more in less time. They're delivering 100 stops in 8 hours as opposed to 100 stops in 10 hours.
But runners, of course, are putting their own bodies at risk. If you run, you are much more likely to get injured. In the short term, you might, for example, pull your back lifting a 70-pound package. Or you may slip and hit your head on the sidewalk. But working at an unsafe pace also erodes your body over time. Every driver I spoke to said the same thing. If you want a career at UPS, stop running. Here's Chris Wallace again from Louisville.
Whatever they conceptualize of as a safe pace is completely made up. only when you do the job yourself can you definitively say that this is what your body can handle and this is what a safe pace really is. The term I heard when I came on was a 30-year pace, which is to say, if you want to do this job for 30 years and collect that pension like so many of us do, then you need to go at a pace that is completely divorced from what management's ideas are.
Of course, with management breathing down your neck, taking your time is easier said than done.
When you begin to realize this and start to work safely, follow all the methods, it's inevitable that your production will drop, that the number of stops per hour that you're delivering will drop. And when this happens, management sees, in their numbers, they see, okay, this person is performing worse than they were, 2 months ago or whatever. And they wonder, well, why are they performing worse? So this is when they start to follow you on the road and try and figure out, what's going on.
You heard that right. UPS will send out supervisors, sometimes covertly, to follow drivers that they believe aren't moving fast enough. Here's a vet.
Well, I've definitely been a target. As a union steward, I'm used to being a target. Here recently, it's picked up very much so. We have a new center manager who I am his definite favorite, come out recording me while I'm, doing my route, following me around, trying to see, how fast I'm driving, how slow, writing me up for saying I drive too slow on the route, that my walk pace is sabotaging or a work stoppage. So if I was somebody who took a lot of that very personally, I would be in a lot of trouble. But I recognize, being around the company this long, that's the type of tactics they use to try to push you.
Now, drivers at UPS are expected to follow the company's quote-unquote 340 methods. Basically, guidelines for the safest and most efficient way of doing their work. And that's everything from which shirt pocket to put your pen in, to making sure you park the car before unbuckling your seatbelt. So when UPS sends supervisors out on the road to surveil drivers, they may be looking for rule breaking, some kind of reason to mete out discipline. But following drivers isn't the only way UPS engages in surveillance. The driver's iconic brown package car, it's covered in sensors that collect data called telematics. UPS not only knows the GPS location of the vehicle, but they know precisely when the driver has their foot on the brake, when they've buckled their seatbelt, when they've opened the bulkhead door, almost everything that they're doing in that truck. And workers have told me that through surveillance, supervisors can exploit that data to discipline drivers who are allegedly breaking the rules. But ironically, sometimes out of the pressure to pick up the pace by those very same managers. This all came to a fever pitch last summer when UPS turned the surveillance up a notch. They introduced cameras in some package cars around the country that faced inward, towards the driver. Justin's truck is one of those.
I think the harassment, the big one, is the inward cameras. That's the huge one for me. I do not like that camera in the truck. It feels like I'm being surveillanced 24 hours. I'm on the phone with, my mother, my father, my wife, and these are personal conversations.
Like Justin, a lot of UPS drivers talk on the phone while they are in the truck. This is allowed by the company, but it's unclear whether or not UPS is recording their audio.
This camera is just right there, and I just sometimes I'll catch it and it talks to you about hand motion or things like that, but it just feels like I'm not saying interrogated, but it just feels like somebody's watching me right there. I mean, they already have telematics, they have all these things already zoomed in on us. How much more do they want to invade your privacy?
Now, part of the outrage about these cameras is that there are more important features that UPSers would like to see in their trucks. An obvious one for a vet in Atlanta is air conditioning, or at the very least, fans.
Well, when I arrived at that building almost 3 years ago, the majority of the trucks, the package cars, did not even have fans in them. And I thought, our contract says that you can request a fan and the fan would be, put in the truck. Well, we live in Georgia. No one should have to request a fan. The back of the truck is an oven. I know you've seen probably several things where people have thermometers in the back getting well over 120 degrees. It's horrible. Like, you're back there for a few seconds and you're drenching in sweat.
But you don't have to be in the South to experience insufferable heat. Here's Lee Brown again from Chicago.
This is like a relay. It's like an actual exercise, and imagine yourself doing all that just under the heat. That's not actually how you're supposed to work out, I would say.
Even Amazon drivers who lack UPSers Union 1 benefits and pay have air conditioners.
A lot of times you see the opposing team, as in USPS, Amazon, and whatnot. We always joke around with each other and stuff. They're like, man, you guys don't have any AC? And we be like, nah, we don't have any AC. They be like, dang, that's messed up. And it seems like every other vehicle, every other company has AC functions in their vehicles.
Last summer, when heat waves battered much of the U.S., drivers started getting vocal about the issue. One of them who took charge was Matt Leichinger from Brooklyn.
It was right around the same time that there was a driver in Pasadena, California, named Esteban Chavez, who died of heat stroke or heat-related injury while working. While that happened, and at the same time, these driver-facing cameras were being put into trucks, it triggered something, and it pushed it over the edge of being like, wait, we don't have air conditioning. They're putting in driver-facing cameras. Why don't they put in an air conditioner to stop people from dying?
Matt and other local 804 UPSers, they thought they could harness this irony and organize their coworkers around it.
A few of us got together and put together this idea of a rally. So we had these rallies at a couple buildings that were titled Safety Not Surveillance. And it was basically coming together and bringing this issue to the attention of everyone.
We are the voices of Chavez. We are the voices of those who have lost their lives while in the back of the vehicle from a heat stroke, heat exhaustion, whatever it may be. So today, as their voice, we tell United Parcel Service to stop putting profit over people and treat us with dignity.
If you heard about UPS workers suffering from heat last summer, that's largely thanks to these rallies. It was smart organizing. They got a lot of attention from the press, and the public took notice.
If you think it's hot, try driving around in the record heat without air conditioning.
There's just no relief anywhere. You can go park in the shade and it might not be 114, it's probably 104.
We're learning more about that alarming video of a UPS guy in distress from the extreme heat. He struggles to make it onto the front porch. Then he collapses, overwhelmed by the 110-degree temperature in Arizona.
Drivers told me that customers even started giving them cold bottles of water and showed other gestures of solidarity with their struggle. Now, public sympathy will be key for the Teamsters to actually win concessions from UPS in the next contract. Unsafe working conditions, excessive overtime, an end to subcontracting. These are issues that all drivers are hoping to address. But according to David Allen, who we heard from earlier, eradicating the 22-4 position entirely is central to this year's contract campaign. Remember the discontent among UPSers that we heard about earlier after President Hoffa pushed through the 2018 contract? Well, that discontent didn't simply marinate into bitterness. It spurred a movement to oust Hoffa and his administration and bring new leaders in.
I'll be honest to you. One of the main reasons I think Sean O'Brien is in office right now is because of how terrible that 2018 contract was. I think a lot of people was pushing for him because he was actively against it.
Indeed, the current general president of the Teamsters Union, Sean O'Brien, was actually the top negotiator for that 2018 contract. That is, before Hoffa ousted him from that post after O'Brien tried to include in bargaining Hoffa's opponents in the union. While he was running, he helped successfully corral union delegates to abolish that 2/3 rule Hoffa had used in 2018. Now, the new leadership has outright stated that if the 22-4 position isn't abolished in the next contract, then 350,000 UPSers will be hitting the picket line in August.
We've made it clear that we will not be working beyond August 1st without a contract. We've got a lot of work to do. We got to eliminate 22-4s, eliminate PVDs. We got to take care.
The elimination of the 22-4 would mean abolition of the two-tier driver system. And that would mean everyone you've heard from in this episode would become not a regular package car driver, but just a normal package car driver with good wages, great benefits, and better protections. But also, beyond UPS, a victory like that would be hugely influential for other workers across industries to oppose their own two-tier systems. Now, remember when I mentioned that 22-4s pretty much never work in the warehouse as their position was intended? Well, 2 months out from national contract negotiations with the Teamsters, UPS started doing something fishy.
They claimed it's a combination job where you would work inside and on the road. But from the time I started up until a couple of weeks ago, I've never had to work inside. There's always been plenty of work for us to go out every day.
That was Yvette again. And recently she's been spending a lot more of her job inside the warehouse. And she's not the only one. Workers have told me that this sudden shift is related to UPS commencing an unprecedented round of layoffs across the workforce in the last couple months, shuffling drivers and warehouse workers around to plug the holes. That includes bringing some 22-4s inside for the first time. UPS is blaming a downturn on package volumes. But with record profits last year, it's not clear that layoffs are totally necessary. While we can't know for sure, some of the workers I've spoken to see the layoffs as a scare tactic ahead of contract negotiations, a way of causing confusion and crushing morale among workers. But the workers I've talked to are not just cowering in fear. They're organizing and putting the pressure right back on UPS.
But the premise is pretty simple, which is that young people are the future of this union, and we need to organize them. We need to educate them. And so that's where our efforts are right now, is bringing in young Teamsters under the age of 40.
Some UPSers like Chris in Louisville are working with their locals to lead what are called futures committees. Chris is aware that 22-4s are usually new to the union. They may need an extra push by organizers to get involved.
Just yesterday, we had a video game social. Now, this is maybe contrasted against the techniques of the past, where you might envision an old dive bar, a group of Teamsters. I don't know what did old Teamsters. I don't even know what old Teamsters did. Did they chomp cigars and drink beer? I guess, I don't know. We want them to feel like they have their hand on the lever of power, because they do. They may not realize it yet, but we want to educate them and help them understand that yes, you, the worker, have the power.
Other UPSers without as explicit support from their local leaderships are trying other methods. Back to Justin Allo from Local 542 in California. Some ways into his 22-4 position, he educated himself about the two-tier, and other Teamsters organizers helped him understand what was at stake in the contract campaign. Justin became every organizer's dream, an effective organizer himself. He'd been trying to come up with strategies to unite the members of his local, when one day, his more senior union sibling, Tim Peppers, approached him.
He had a vision, an idea. He came to me. He was like, "Hey, man, I got this idea." I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And he said, "Man, I have this vision about, bringing solidarity and unity." And I said, "Okay, so what do you want me to do?" He's like, "I don't know how to get through to the younger generation." He was like, "But I heard you're the person to kind of talk to. I want to somehow build a bridge, through these part-timers and the younger 224s and cover drivers." I said, when he laid the idea out, I said, "Bet, I got you. I know how to talk to them," and sure enough, that led to what we have now. We call Unity Breakfast. Who wouldn't want a voice on their contract for their future? So that's where I'm getting at. What is your why and what you come to work every day? Mine is my family. So yes, I do want to be involved. I do want to know the ins and outs of my job, what can and what can't hurt me. And that's why I'm here.
So Justin, Tim, and other 542 UPSers began holding Unity breakfasts every Friday morning, 7 to 8. What started as just a few Teamsters talking at a local Hawaiian deli blossomed into gatherings of dozens of members, and most notably, those who hit the picket line themselves during the national UPS strike in 1997.
We're having guest speakers come. We had retirees come out and share their experiences on the picket line. What made them strike, what their experience was like, what it was like on walking the picket line. Man, they were like, "This is awesome what you guys are doing." And it's like a respect thing, for the vets. It's like they did something so monumental that it still echoes 25 years now. And my thing to the younger drivers is, I try to ask them, or I will ask them, is what we have right now and everything that, is in place was never given to us. Everything was fought for from all the Teamsters before us. So this stuff can be easily taken away if we don't know our rights.
Justin and Tim, who was a 97 striker himself, realized that their cross-generational organizing was working. And eventually, their local leadership in San Diego caught wind of what they were doing. Last Friday, Justin thought that only a few top union officers would be coming up to join them for breakfast. Instead, nearly all of them attended. Justin and Tim were floored. This weekend is their union's general membership meeting, and they're going to see if they can start uniting the young and the old across the local. And Justin plans to tell his fellow 22-4s what he's already been telling those in his own building.
My thing with this whole contract coming up and the upsurge is whether you get involved or not, it's going to affect you. I would think that you would want to say so in your future.
You just listened to the second of 2 episodes we're producing that sought to show what it's like to be a UPS worker in our unprecedented time. For now, our regular episodes will revert back to our normal interview format. But if you like this kind of episode, let us know, and perhaps we'll do it again. You can do so first and foremost by contributing to our Patreon at patreon.com/upsurgepod. Find the link in the description. We are so unbelievably heartened by the support we've gotten so far. If you haven't already, please become a patron so we can keep this show going. You can also show your support by sharing the episode on social media or other channels, giving us a 5-star rating, and reviewing us. Follow us on Twitter at UpsurgePod and Facebook The Upsurge. We've also recently made a YouTube channel that gives you the first 10 minutes or so of each episode. So yeah, go subscribe to our channel, The Upsurge, at UpsurgePod. Thank you to all of our patrons, but a very special thank you and shout out to our patrons at the business agent tier or higher: Tony Winters, David Allen, Justin Allo, Greg Kerwood, Tim Peppers, Dan Arlen, Dimitri Legas, Juliet Kang, Rand Wilson, Randy Ostro, Mac Harden, and Timothy Kruger. Also, I wanted to shout out David Allen again, who has been spreading the word about our show on his own excellent YouTube channel, Roswell Hub. If you don't know it, go watch that show right now. The podcast was edited by myself. It was produced by NYGP and Ruby Walsh. Music is by Casey Gallagher, Jazar, and Xylo Zico. The cover art was done by Devlin Claro Recitar. I'm Teddy Ostro. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time.